I would like to welcome you to this second part of the evaluation session. And just a quick intro from my side. I'm Barbara Kieslinger. I'm a project manager at the Center for Social Innovation. I don't know why my slides are going so fast. And I'm supposed to be co-chairing this with Nicola, who's a psychologist, and she's at the moment doing some research at the Museum of the Museum of Natural Sciences in Berlin. And we had, like, as Nicola was saying in the previous session, we had the most submissions for evaluation, which is great because it shows that there is a lot of interest, a lot going on, and a lot to talk about. And so we were in the lucky position to get 2 slots. You know, we're the only ones in evaluation. There were 2 slots. And for those who were not selected, they also were invited to submit posters because we couldn't accommodate everyone. And there were so many good submissions. So those who are not in this session, you might also find a lot of evaluation addressed in the posters. We had a first session already with these 4 speakers, and now I'm actually passing over to the second part, where we will have Margarida Sardo from Bristol in the UK. She's a senior research fellow in Science Communication Unit, and she's going to talk more about the We Count project, as far as I heard, and how to make project engagement evaluation work on large scale. I think you're talking about the large scale evaluation experiences. Then we will have Nerea Ferrando Jorge from the Reading University in the UK. And she is apart from being an environmental scientist, she's also a visual artist. So it's going to be really interesting to hear from you, Nerea, also about how you're talking about this myth of, data quality isn't good when it's done by citizens. And then we will move on to Giovanni Macani, who's in Barcelona now. He is working for the Ideas for Change, and he's going to talk a bit more about scalability factors in citizen science interventions. And then we will have Anneli Jansen in Rotterdam, who is replacing Antonella Bassani because she's sick, and we will hear from Anneli Jansen then more also about the action project, if I remember correctly. Yes. So we are looking really forward to these presentations. I would just like to say that we asked people to do like maximum 10-minute presentation. There will be always a room for questions, for clarifying questions at the end. Put them in the chat and we will collect them. And if we have time, hopefully still a little bit of wrapping up discussion on whole topic of evaluation and what are important aspects, important challenges and opportunities for evaluation in citizen science. So without further ado, I would like to hand over then to Margarida, our first speaker, and please share your slides and start your presentation.
Yes, just bear with me 1 second. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, hello everybody. Thank you so much for having me in this session. My name is Margarida Sardo and I'm a senior research fellow and a lecturer in science communication. I work at the University of the West of England in Bristol in the United Kingdom. And today I'll be talking to you about evaluation in the context of large European citizen science projects. I'm currently leading the evaluation work package for the We Count project. We Count stands for Citizens Observing Urban Transport, and it's a European project that started in December last year, and it will come to an end at the end of 2021. And it's funded by the Horizon 2020 SWOFS program. Road traffic and urban mobility is no doubt a hot topic, with plenty of citizens already engaged. We Count aims to empower citizens to take a leading role in the production of data, the production of evidence, and knowledge around mobility in their own neighborhoods. But how do we do this exactly? Each we count participant will mount a low-cost automated road traffic counting sensor, which is called a TELRAM, and it's what you can see here on this picture. And they will mount this in a window in their house, and that window needs to face a road. The sensor then does everything by itself. It counts the number and the speed of cars, large vehicles, cyclists, and even pedestrians. So citizen scientists will be involved in collecting the data, analyzing that data, and engage with key stakeholders throughout the process. So specifically in WeCount, we want to work with scientists to quantify local road transport, to produce new knowledge on local mobility, and to co-create informed solutions to tackle the various problems. So those mobility problems might be speeding, rut running, air pollution, etc. And where is WeCount? At the moment we have 5 case studies involved. We have Leuven in Belgium, Madrid and Barcelona in Spain, Ljubljana in Slovenia, Dublin in Ireland, and Cardiff in the United Kingdom. The WeCount project draws upon the successful Clare City project, which I will just briefly introduce now. So Clare City, which now has come to an end in July 2020, was an Horizon 2020 funded project, which aimed to raise awareness about air pollution and carbon emissions in our cities, looking at how we all contribute to the problems and how they can affect the air we breathe. Within Clare City, we did a full project evaluation, and that evaluation, the design of that evaluation and the findings of that evaluation have informed the evaluation framework that we are using in WeCount. So coming back to WeCount, what are we doing? On this slide, you can see a quick overview of the evaluation methods that we are using. So the framework has been designed to work across our different countries, 5 different countries and cultures. And we are using online surveys, for example, to evaluate our workshops, as well as towards the end of the project to understand how the participants' experience has been. We will also run a small number of focus groups, as this gives us direct access to experiences of citizen scientists. Towards the end of the project, we will be conducting in-depth interviews, both with selected citizens and also with the WeCount team, as we want to evaluate the impacts of running a citizen science project on our team as well. And finally, we are already using reflective logs. So WeCount staff running events and workshops is being asked to keep a reflective log. By having access to the thoughts, views, opinions, and post-event reflections of our own staff, this will enable triangulation with other evaluation data. Of course, it goes without saying that the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has meant that our evaluation plans had to change and adapt. So we are now running all our focus groups online, and we found that embedding our focus groups within the WeCount workshops works really well for us. Our interviews will most likely take place over the phone or Skype, but they will not be face-to-face. We are also exploring online tools such as Padlet for quickly collecting some feedback from our participants. There are some tools out there that make for a more interesting and engaging experience for participants to give feedback. So it doesn't need to be the same old boring survey. The WeCount evaluation team, which I lead, is providing our local teams with extra support, such as using evaluation mentor, someone that is there for all your evaluation needs and questions. We are keeping in touch much more regularly now. We are testing out online tools for our local teams, and we are providing training on how to evaluate remotely. So if you are involved in large-scale project evaluations such as WeCount, the kind of WeCount and Clare City, and especially if you are involved in projects that include several different countries, you are likely to be in the same position that I am, which is you're leading the evaluation without actually carrying it out. This means that you and your evaluation team, you're responsible for designing the evaluation, producing all forms, implementing the evaluation and reporting on it. But you are likely to have to rely on other people, so for us, people in Madrid, people in Leuven, to actually distribute the surveys or conduct the interviews. And this can be really tricky. So I will now share some best practice in running large-scale evaluations. And this is learning coming both from Clear City project, which has now finished, and the ongoing WeCount project. The more evaluation support and training you give, the better it will go. It goes without saying. Another tip from us is that you should be aware of cultural differences, both in terms of the project, your project colleagues and the participants. Different cultures might have different perceptions of a survey, for example, or they might be less likely to participate in consultations. What I'm trying to say is that what may work from one country and culture might not work for another. So bear that in mind. Your local teams are unlikely to include someone with a lot of expertise in evaluation. So we need to keep evaluation simple and clear. So even people that are not experts in evaluation can carry out evaluation for you. It's really important to create step-by-step guides, to draft email templates so your teams can contact stakeholders. So provide all evaluation templates well in advance. In other words, do everything you can in the background so your teams are ready to just deploy the evaluation. In terms of data collection is really important. So we found out that creating really clear and easy to use templates for data collection, such as Excel spreadsheets and Word tables, works really well. And finally, a word on data storage. So it's important to have a dedicated place where your teams can just dump the evaluation data that they just collected. So creating a dedicated online folder, for example, where your local teams can upload their data is really helpful. But keep reminding everyone that they need to upload their data. They won't remember that. So just friendly emails. I know you had a workshop next week. Can you please upload your evaluation data? Works really well. So there's a lot of holding hands here. So your local teams are likely to need lots and lots of support and help. So be there for them. So bottom line, communication is indeed key. Try to be as clear as possible in any communications that you have to do with your local teams, and keep in touch regularly with everyone. A word on translation. So don't get lost in translation. Get everything translated in advance. So you have produced all these evaluation forms. They are ready, but they are probably not in the local languages. So evaluation materials that need translation should get translated really early on the process. Translation it takes time and effort, so make sure that's ready when you need them. You need it. Get your local teams familiar with your evaluation forms and templates in advance. And what I'm saying here is not send them your evaluation forms and templates well in advance. What I'm saying is, for instance, schedule a short video call and walk them through the materials. Share your screen, show them the form, and walk them slowly through the materials. In the end, these are the people that will be distributing the forms for you, your evaluation forms for you. They will be collecting evaluation data for you. The better they know the materials, the best data they will collect. Also be friendly and polite. We are all humans in the end. And we are asking our colleagues to do a lot for us in terms of evaluation. It's important to bear in mind that their focus, our local team's focus, is usually on delivering the events, not so much on evaluation. There's a really fine balance between what we would like to evaluate, which is probably everything, and what can actually be evaluated within a large-scale project. So find that balance early on the project. And finally, be part of the team, attend meetings, make video calls, keep in touch. If your project colleagues are used to see you and they know you well, they are more likely to do whatever you are asking them to do. So that's all from me. I would like to thank the WeCount Consortium and all our partners for making this presentation possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Margarida. Thank you for sharing these very important lessons learned and insights that you have gained so far from your large-scale evaluations. It really resonates with me because me and my team, we also find ourselves often in that situation that we are coordinating the evaluation, but we aren't really there. And we often feel like, oh, we should have our own case. We should be there on the ground, not just training the others. So I was wondering also in terms and cultural differences, as you say, they make a lot of it. Yeah, they are important to actually to notice and to reflect upon. So I was wondering, because we are even trying in another project now some co-evaluation. So I was wondering, in your case at least, where at least your local teams, were they partly involved in designing the evaluation instruments? So to make sure also that the cultural differences, for example, aren't too big, or were you drafting, designing these instruments more from a top-down perspective, so to say, as an evaluator?
So I think it's a mixture of both. So we had local teams involved in advising us on what would work for them, but it's a more top-bottom approach. So because it's such a large-scale project, the other colleagues are focused on their own work packages. So it's tricky to involve everyone at the same time. But early on the We Count project, we had to submit an evaluation framework. That was one of our deliverables. And that framework went through an internal approval process. So everyone that sits on the EMG of We Count, they had a say. They were able to review our framework and contribute and comment on it. So in that sense, yes, we had some feedback. We also learned a lot from the Clare City project where we had, for instance, some local teams in countries were completely compliant with whatever we were asking them to do. They would just do it. And we found that certain citizens were also very prone to just say yes to an interview or a survey or whatever. But we had other teams that were a lot more comfortable in being a bit more involved in designing the surveys, for instance, in having a saying in which questions we were asking. So I think that was what I was trying to say, with bearing in mind different cultures, not just the participants, so the citizen scientists that we are trying to gather feedback from, but also the people that you are working within your teams. Because some people are, they just do what you ask them to do, because that's what they want. They don't want to have anything to do with designing the evaluation. Other people really want to be involved, and that's how they then support you and are local advocates for the evaluation. So it's being mindful of those differences.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I can understand that. And there's one more question, maybe quickly to follow up from my colleague Teresa, about privacy and personal data issues when you share these large data sets that you collect there on and cross partners. Have you there encountered any problems so far in terms of sharing it across partners of the consortium?
So I work for the University of the West of England in Bristol, which is in the UK, and we have a really, really rigorous process of ethics approval that we have to go through before we start collecting data. So we are not allowed to collect any data at all. We're not allowed to have any contact with citizens, actually, before we go through that ethics approval. That ethics approval details everything from data collection to data storage. So we are not allowed to share any raw data that identifies citizens with any partners, even within the project. So only a selected group of researchers within the project have access to the raw data, and that's a very selected number of staff. Everyone else, they may or may not have access to data, but it will all be confidential and anonymized, and no data will be able, we can't track our citizens just by looking at the data. It's impossible. So yes, our ethics approval process is really, really rigorous, which makes our colleagues sometimes slightly frustrated with us, because it's so rigorous, and you have to go through all these steps and all these forms, collecting this and that, and consent forms and information sheets. But it means that both us researchers and our citizens are completely protected.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, we have another question in the chat, but maybe you can answer that in between in the chat because I think I need to look a bit at the time also.
Okay.
So thanks again, Margarida. And I would like to hand over now to Nerea, who is going to present us more about the myth behind, so to say, the data quality in citizen science. So Nerea, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Nerea, and today I'm actually going to be showing you a pre-recorded presentation. This way you can learn about soil color and our citizen science research, but without my internet connectivity issues. But I'll stay around for any questions. And I think now Marcel is going to actually put the video on.
For sure.
Thank you. It's not working for me. I don't know.
No, is anybody already seeing the video?
So we tried this out before.
I see it.
We see slides, but we don't have audio. Or are you going to talk us through, Nerea?
I think
Your
maybe
connection seems fine.
a second. Maybe I missed something. Stop. I think I missed to click the button that the audio is also shared. Sorry for this.
Okay, let's give it a second try.
I'm Nerea Ferrando, and starting, I just wanted to say that I have a mixed background. I studied environmental science, but actually also fine arts. And I always try to integrate both disciplines directly through my illustrations, which are throughout the PowerPoint, but also indirectly. I think it resonates in the way I think about my scientific research. Now I'm working in a PhD, which is very interdisciplinary, looking at both science and social science research. Today I'll be focusing on a specific part where we've been analyzing the validity of soil color data gathered by citizen scientists. This work was carried out as part of Earthwatch's Sustainable Cities project. It's a collaboration between citizen scientists, which were actually HSBC bank employees, and academic researchers from different institutes and universities, such as the ones you see below. During organized events, soil and tree data was collected by trained participants at 3 major urban parks in the UK and France, which you actually may be familiar with, such as Kew Gardens, Cannon Hill Park, and Les Fontaines near Paris. Although the overall aim of this project is looking at how to manage urban trees and soil more effectively for climate change mitigation, here I'm only going to be focusing on soil color measurements from the research. So everyone here knows what citizen science is, and that it's become a very common approach for scientific data collection. Now, one of the reasons is because of its enormous potential to produce data sets that would otherwise be infeasible to generate, especially in scale and scope. However, a major barrier to its use are concerns with the validity of this data because it's collected by non-professionals. Particularly, the aspect of data quality that springs the most skepticism among scientists is the variability and accuracy of the data. And this is the myth we hope to debunk. Since the growing body of recent publications are showing that citizen scientists can produce data that is on par with that of professionals. Instead, the real challenge we're seeing is that we need to rethink how to evaluate citizen science data. In our study, we'll be assessing soil color data gathered by citizen scientists using the Munsell method. This method consists of visually matching each soil sample to a specific color chip from the Munsell book. So you get an idea, there's over 250 pages of soil color charts. So soil color using this method is widely used in soil science because it's cheap and relatively easy, and it also tells you a lot of information about soil, such as its mineralogy, hydrology, and organic matter content, So it's important to understand, an important indicator to understand the soil health and quality. However, although the validity of visual soil color estimates are mostly accepted when soil scientists take them, there are questions for non-scientists. And this is curious because of two main reasons. One, the subjective nature, right, of this very qualitative method. But also the second one is that the creator of this color system was actually an artist who made this system so that anyone could determine soil color, as long as they had two things, a normal color vision and they controlled the illumination conditions. So our aim is to show that citizen scientists can make soil color measurements that are actually on par with professional scientists, and they could help advance soil health monitoring. However, we want to do this with a particular emphasis on when they are studied with appropriate data quality metrics. In other words, when evaluated similarly. So we're going to do this in three ways. First of all, we'll be comparing the variability in soil color visual estimates by professionals and non-professionals over time, so over the 27 events. Then for accuracy, what we'll do is we'll turn the tables and compare the visual estimates made by both scientists and citizen scientists to a color computed through a machine called a spectrophotometer as a true reference of soil color. This, we think, is a more fair system of evaluation. And thirdly, we'll be investigating other underlying factors that could be affecting soil color visual estimates that maybe should be considered in the evaluation process. So for the visual soil color measurements, they were made by citizen scientists in the field and by professionals in the lab. The citizen scientists were trained during organized events and had to visually match the soil samples to a specific color chip. Now, they did this only using the 7.5YR Moczek color extract. In other words, a specific handout that actually you can see in the drawing I made of the Moczek color book. In the end, in total, they took around 600 soil color measurements over the 2-year period. And they also labeled soil bags, which were then sent to the University of Reading. In the lab, experienced observers made visual soil color estimates using the same samples collected by the participants. However, this was done in two ways. One, we used the same protocol. In other words, we used a copy of the 7.5YR Moczek color extract, but also we decided to use the whole color book, which has over 250 pages for both moist and air-dried soil samples. To measure the true soil color or benchmark, we used a spectrophotometer, the machine that you see in the photo. Basically, we made a soil solution for each sample and we measured the amount of red, green, and blue light that was reflected. This, together with different equations and functions, adds together to a specific mixture of red, green, and blue light, which equals a specific color, like the shade of brown you can see below, which, by the way, equals to the Moczek value 7.5YR24. So we decided to use this method as a benchmark also because it is now being used as a more accurate way to determine color in many disciplines and is recently being picked up in soil science. This is just a table so that you can get a snapshot of what the math looks like. It shows the conversion from spectral data to RGB coordinates for just one sample, actually. The outcomes so far are quite promising. I wanted to just highlight some of the findings so far about the accuracy of the data with this conceptual diagram that I hope you'll understand. This is from the analysis for one sample point over the 27 events, with the average color determined by participants, professionals, and computed from spectral data. What's important to point out is that when using the same protocol, both participants and scientists chose a practically identical color value. You can see it in the top rectangle. However, as I explained, we wanted to compare the accuracy to spectral measurements of soil color as a true and more fair benchmark. And you can see that this value is quite different in the bottom left corner. The color is a much darker shade of brown. Instead, when using the whole Moczek book, we can see that scientists in the lab were able to determine the spectral color accurately in the bottom right corner. So what's wrong? Well, usually what happens in citizen science is that data is contrasted between participants and professionals. And from this example, you can see why this may be a problem. Comparing the data when both groups use the same protocol leads to high precision but low accuracy, as the value is nowhere near the bullseye, thus poor data quality overall. And when comparing citizen science data with the professional's value using another method, it's just an unjust form of valuation since it's not the same conditions. This stacked bar chart is good visual aid to see how we can easily and significantly improve this protocol and the data quality. Out of the 586 soil color measurements taken, according to professionals using the Munsell method, about 23% were color chips in the 7.5 wire extract, so this is the blue. However, 71% could be categorized as 10 YR, so the orange. So this means that by simply having handed out a copy of the 10 YR sheet, it could have accounted for nearly 95% of all the samples if you add the orange and the blue, most likely changing the results significantly. So this reinforces the point that we really need a more fair system of valuation for the robustness of the data. Overall, we've had really good progress, but we need to continue with the soil color analysis, particularly investigating other underlying factors that could affect soil color estimates. We already know that there are limitations with the Munsell method. Since it is a subjective method prone to error. And I've already pointed out some of the problems with the design or the valuation of the citizen science soil color measurements by limiting the soil color chart to only 7.5 YR. But what we also need to investigate are other environmental conditions that can affect soil color estimates, which may be important to improve data quality and robustness for future projects, such as how do we take into account varying illumination conditions in the field? Soil color looks very different if it's cloudy versus if it's a sunny day, as well as soil conditions such as if the soil is wet or dry, and other conditions such as just the variability because the soil is found in urban areas, so there could be different patches of color nearby. So in the end, our hope is to show that citizen science data is just as valid as science color data. And we really want to do this because we believe that the involvement of citizen science projects is crucial for soil science research. Always, of course, when adequate protocols and appropriate data validation processes are in place. But as well, I've just written in bold something that I haven't covered in this talk, but I will be investigating for my PhD, showing other benefits of citizen science beyond data collection. Because I've come to realize that the most important benefits of citizen science are being missed because of this focus on data quality. For example, as a whole, the project I'm taking part in is tackling not only environmental sustainable development goals, but also economic and social ones. And this, I believe, is the only and true pathway to sustainability. Thank you for listening. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Nerea. Very, very interesting talk as well. And as we heard also in the plenaries, there is still within the science communities, within the different fields, scientific fields, citizen science is probably not as accepted as some of us wish it would be. Did you come across then some scientists in your, in your environmental studies field or so that that had also were skeptical before about this, the data quality collected by citizens, and that you could then convince them, prove with your study that actually there is a good quality also delivered by citizen scientists?
So to answer the question fast, basically, I decided to do this paper because every single time I did, I went to a conference or I talked about the use of, citizen science data, everyone was saying, well, actually, it won't be the same quality, right? Because it's made by non-professionals. And this is why I decided to say, why is this? Why is it different? Just because someone is a scientist, but if the right methodologies are in place, anyone can be a scientist, really, following a protocol. So yes, basically every single time I talk to someone that is purely in scientific field, especially like physics or something like this, they'll all say what are you doing, using citizen science data? It's not going to be, valid. I can't hear.
Sorry, yes, turning off the mic. So thanks a lot again for this very valuable contribution that I think is we're going to be cited a lot again as well to make sure that we can prove that data from citizen scientists is equally of equal quality compared to professionals. So thanks a lot. I would just like to hand over now to Giovanni, and you're going to talk a bit more all about scalability factors, right? So happy to.
Yes, indeed. Can you all see my slides?
The floor is yours.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thanks very much, everyone. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Giovanni Maccani. I work at Ideas for Change, and today I will talk about our study that's entitled Scalable by Design, a framework to design more impactful citizen science intervention. Just wanted to mention that this is the result of a teamwork that I've conducted myself with my colleagues, Margaret, Valeria, Mara, and Javier from Ideas for Change, together with Krisha and Sven from the Joint Research Center at the European Commission. So, bit of introduction, I guess. So scaling is acknowledged to be a key issue in citizen science. Very often, citizen science intervention are very much context specific, and as a result, the learning and the impact of such intervention is very much situated. So this remains a key issue and a key challenge for citizen science research, as well as for neighboring disciplines. For example, some argue scalability being the holy grail for social innovation more broadly. So our study, I guess, aimed at addressing these challenges, and we will propose an empirically and theoretically grounded framework encompassing the enabler of scaling, or the factors that influence scaling in citizen science, or this complex and multifaceted phenomenon of scaling, right? So, bit of agenda for the next 9 minutes, I believe now. So I'll go a little bit through the concept and how we directly approach the concept of scaling in citizen science. I'll mention multiple case studies that we've carried out to instantiate the findings from the theory, as well as to derive 4 different scaling scenarios, and I'll conclude with some reflections, limitations, and future research. So, first of all, scaling. What we did, we first looked at how it is defined in the citizen science literature. Again, we saw that this term has been used inconsistently. So we went back to the basis, I guess, and we looked at the definition of the word scaling, right? So at its core, what we've realized is that there's elements of replication, of growth, of extension from one context to another context through a scaling process. Very simple scheme that allowed us to break down our initial question into 3 sub-research questions, I suppose. So what are the intrinsic elements of an initial intervention that influence its likelihood to scale? What are the elements that facilitate the scaling process? And what are the elements that a target concept should possess to be for an intervention to scale there? How did we address these questions? So first, we looked at the citizen science literature, which once again wasn't really a good source of evidence in that respect. So we made a step back and we looked at 3 existing theories from different disciplines that were found to be relevant to explain this process. These were diffusion of innovation, Everett Rogers from sociology, technology adoption from information systems, and specifically the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology, and theories around infrastructuring, appropriation, and communities from the conversations in participatory design. So, review of these theories, aggregation of their constructs, led us to the definition of 9 different constructs that are understood as enabler of scaling in citizen science across the 3 categories that I've just mentioned, right? So, elements of a given citizen science initiative, or intrinsic elements, we've defined proof of value. So meaning that an initiative is more likely to scale if its value can be demonstrated, measured, and it's present. Openness, elements around open data, open source software, open hardware, but also on open participation and open governance within the intervention. Easy of use and understand, which it also includes reflection on task granularity and how this influences scaling. Elements regarding the process, so elements of community and champions, and we've broken down communities into different actors and roles that they may play for scaling citizen science actions. knowledge sharing and transfer resources, which includes all the educational material, books, toolkits, and so on. And obviously the role of communication and dissemination, and interestingly, the role of narratives. So this is an interesting one, as we've observed that sometimes citizen science interventions scale not necessarily because they prove to be valuable, but really because others want to embody a narrative or gain legitimacy about they're having initiatives on citizen engagement and inclusion and so on. Finally, elements of the target socio-technical context, we've identified alignment of matter of concern, meaning that if you have an initial project that's measuring or mapping ticks in an area, this is not likely to scale to an area where there's no ticks, as simple as that, and alignment of legal norms and social values. So these were the 9 constructs we've identified from these 3 theories, right? And that's our framework that's theoretically grounded. Second phase of the study was to try and instantiate this framework through a multiple case study. So we've selected 4 cases based on stakes selection criteria, so cases that were relevant to understand the phenomena of interest, so citizen science intervention that scaled to some extent, cases that needed to be diverse across them, so diversity in terms of domain and in terms of scaling stage, that makes sense, as well as based on accessibility of data and availability of people to share data and documents about their case studies. So we've gathered data through semi-structured interviews and document analysis. I wish I could give a complete overview of each case. I'll give some highlights in the next couple of slides before I draw some conclusions. So first case was Making Sense Barcelona and the Smart Citizen Kit. Here, what we've identified was a narrative dominant scaling scenario. So in this case, scaling happened through communities, through scaling a narrative that wanted to be filled by citizens in terms of around empowering citizens to enable change through collecting evidence on high noise pollution level in the city. Interestingly, here the project scaled even before proof of value was actually achieved. Second one, Freshwater Watch. Most of you may be familiar with it, global project on citizen science and water quality monitoring. In this case, scaling was the result of an infrastructuring and train-the-trainer approach, whereby there's a set of resources, methodologies, and toolkits that are provided centrally to local communities that adopt them, adapt them to their local needs and issues, I suppose, and then they run their actions almost autonomously, contributing data back to the central platform. Third case was Luftdaten and Sensor.Community, another very popular case in citizen science. And in this case, what we've identified was the key role played by 2 different communities, which contribution over time enabled what we called virtuous cycles. Those communities were communities of citizens that contribute data about air quality onto the platforms, and communities of developers that develop application on top of the data being contributed by citizens. Virtuous cycles means that as more citizens contribute data, they attract more developers that develop new application, which in turn attract more citizens that contribute more data, and so on and so forth over time. Last case was a compelling case, OpenStreetMap, again, very popular one. Some of you may say it's not a proper citizen science overall, but it has definitely a million of citizen science elements within it. So in OpenStreetMap, once again, was a compelling case in which we've identified elements of each of the other cases. So they had a narrative dominant scaling at the beginning in the UK. They did infrastructuring through the establishment of their local chapters, and they eventually reached virtuous cycles, which eventually became network effects as the initiative grew and became a well-acknowledged standard in the mapping discourse. So what? I'll be brief. I'm not taking my time. I'm hoping I'm on time still. So a lot of lessons learned from the study, and mainly that the framework is quite good in outlining what the enablers of scaling are. All the constructs that we've identified were found to be relevant in the case studies. And while sometimes some construct may be dominant amongst others, we see that this depends very much on the boundary condition, and also it evolves over time. So overall scaling is really a result of a sort of dynamic balance amongst constructs over time, constructs that we've identified. Just concluding, I guess, this was a very much an ambitious study tackling such a complex topic, and we acknowledge that there's limitations. We advocate for future research to add additional case studies. We don't claim that our scenarios are exhaustive, and not even the constructs themselves. So we do advocate for more qualitative research in these directions. We also advocate for quantitative research, investigating to what extent each construct actually influences scaling, and also longitudinal studies that might look at the role of each construct over time. Concluding, for those that are interested, this study is being published in a book. It's now in the hand of the European Commission Press Agency. In the book, it's quite extensive description also of the methodology behind it. There's a chapter dedicated to each of the case studies. There's an in-depth reflection on each of the constructs, the interdependencies amongst those, as well as the trade-off sometimes. And we also add additional reflections on the positive and negative role that AI and blockchain distributed ledger technologies can play towards scaling looking forward. And that was me. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. Thanks a lot. It was also a very interesting presentation and super interesting study. So everybody would like to read already the whole paper, I guess. Fortunately, we have to wait a little bit until the book is out. There were already some people asking in the chat about it. Just one quick question for me out of curiosity, because you have these 9 factors that you presented us in the framework, and I guess it was clear that that was often a combination and interdependencies of these factors. But did you even come across something completely new in your cases so far, which you hadn't originally in your framework? Was there any surprising factor that you said, wow, we didn't really think that that was such an important factor also for scaling, or in combination with something?
This was something actually that we expected, because we really followed sequentially theory and practice. And that's why our data collection was first inductive. We didn't even mention the framework, hoping that more constructs would emerge. But I guess the theories are well established and do a kind of a good work, and all the elements that we've identified could actually fit within those. What we identified, though, is that sometimes elements or construct may not play a role at all, or sometimes there's trade-offs amongst them. So let's say, or for instance, easy of use, right? Or proof of value. Sometimes something that's very valuable is something that's very complex to undertake, that entails a very granular task by a citizen scientist, right? And sometimes these things are in trade-off with one another. Also easy of use. Sometimes we do want to automate tasks for citizens to make them make it easier for them to contribute to a study. But then if you automate all the tasks, you lose that in-depth participation, the co-design that citizens should be involved in, right? So, and then back against, okay, it might, increase the quality of the data that we gathered, but is this really what we mean by extreme citizen science or citizen science? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a lot of food for thought, and that would, trigger a lot of discussion actually. So thanks a lot. I just have to look at the time, and I would like to hand over now to Anneli Jansen, and she's going to give the final presentation in this round now. So Anneli, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Great. Today I'll be talking about a modular, flexible, and scalable impact assessment framework for citizen science, following a co-design approach. And this framework has been developed within the Action Project, and mainly by Antonella and me. So what is Action? It's a European project that aims to transform citizen science by making it even more participatory, inclusive, citizen-led, and democratic. And how do we do that? Mainly, we're developing an online toolkit that can be used by citizen science projects for various aspects of their projects. We also have an accelerator in which we invite 10 citizen science projects to join our team, so to say, and they get funding as well as support from us. And we also organize policy masterclasses in 6 EU countries in order to mainstream and leverage citizen science for policy. Then last, we also have an open call. I just want to plug this until the 1st of November. We're still open for 4 citizen science projects to join us. So please look at our website if you want to apply. So the impact assessment. We would like to measure the impact of citizen science projects. It is a flexible, scalable, and modular framework, and we're doing this via co-design. So we started from the literature and along the way have gathered feedback from both our colleagues, but also from citizen scientists, citizen science projects. I believe we're currently in our 3rd draft, but I think there's going to be a few more before we reach our final version. And in the end, we want it to be used independently as a tool in our toolkit. So citizen science projects can actually also evaluate themselves. And through this tool, they can show funding agencies or policymakers or other people that are interested what the impact has been from their project. So we have 6 areas of impact: environmental impact, economic, political, social, scientific, as well as transformative impact. And for those 6 main dimensions, we also have sub-dimensions. So for example, for scientific impact, there is a part that's about scientific knowledge. There's a part about new research fields and interdisciplinarity, new knowledge resources, and innovation in education. So for all these 6 areas, there are different sub-dimensions. And the last one I'll come to in the next slide, because these 5, I think, are more standard in the impact assessment frameworks that we see in the literature. In fact, we were very inspired by the framework developed by Kieslinger and colleagues. So we departed from that mainly. But then we added the transformative impact, and to us that means to what extent does the project question, change, or challenge elements of the dominant regime. So what we see as a regime is basically business as usual, current structures and practices. For example, in mobility, it's cars; in the energy system, it's gas and oil. But then there's also niches, which are spaces for radical innovations that challenge that dominant regime. So for mobility, that can be bike sharing or public transport, and for energy, renewables like wind and solar. But we think citizen science can also be that kind of a niche to challenge actually the science system as it currently is, which can be said to be quite hierarchical and perhaps not open to everyone. But citizen science can change that, I think. And to assess the transformative impact of projects, we look at 5 indicators, so to say. We ask if the project is radical, iconic, catalyzing, timely, and allows for learning. So in that sense, these 5 indicators allow us to predict if the project can transform the system in the long term. So modularity, what do I mean by that? Basically, because citizen science projects are so diverse and so different from each other, we don't want to send every single citizen science project the same 30-page questionnaire. So what we did before sending them questionnaires is to give them a canvas in which they score from 1 to 5 whether they think certain sub-dimensions are relevant for them. So if they think they'll have impact on policy processes, they give that a 5. and that allows us to focus on those aspects and measure them in the end. So we've tested this for a number of projects, and as we see, I mean, there is quite a diverse range of what people think is important for their project. The social impact is always quite high, as you might expect, and the economic impact slightly lower. But if you look at scientific impact, some score it a 5, whether others score it only a 1. Now let's look at the indicators. What do we actually ask the project? This is a big graph, but don't worry about the details. But basically, I want to show you that for every single subdimension, we've divided it up into variables. So for example, the subdimension knowledge in academia is broken down into a number of variables like quantity of the new data, as well as quality of the data and publications. Then those variables are further broken down into questions. So some variables only need one question, but others need quite a few, like the quality of data that we have also heard about before. So it's quite interesting. For most questions, the citizen science managers can actually answer the questions, but for some, mostly in the social impact, we also ask the citizens themselves. Okay, so we have this huge list of questions. How can we use that in data gathering? We can use it in interviews. So use it as a kind of interview guide with your citizen science projects, or you can just, we can also compile a standalone questionnaire that is relevant to, that is tailored to the project. And once you have the results, this is going to be my last slide, how can you actually use the results? So this is an example from one of our citizen science projects that have used this impact assessment for their final report of their project. So below you can see that they look at the more quantitative data, so they can indicate, okay, we think we've had a big impact on changes in the way of thinking, but we've had a smaller impact on social inclusion, for example. But then also you can see you can use it as a more narrative tool. So in reading all the questions, the citizen science projects can see like, oh, actually this aspect we've scored really high on, and then they can explain what they've done for that particular impact. So this is briefly how our impact assessment works. And yeah, thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anneli. It was, of course, very exciting for me to also see how, how our framework was inspiring and how it has developed further in your work, which is really great. I would have a lot of questions there, of course, because I'm really excited about the work that you're doing here. Just one more organizational question that we have here in the chat, because I'm asking who can attend your policy masterclasses? What's the process to applying for those?
That's a great question, because we're actually looking for a lot of partners. We're hoping to reach actual policymakers, but of course we also want to include citizen science projects to actually increase their visibility. And the countries will be the UK, Spain, Norway, Germany, Netherlands, and Italy. So if you have any relevant contacts or context for those countries and want to be involved, please let us know. We'd love your input.
Thank you very much. By the way, and just that reminds me of something completely different. I have another hat on now because we also have the EU Citizen Science platform. So maybe if you have any of these calls or so, it would be nice to launch them also via the platform so that they get also visibility there. And there is a discussion forum and so on. So please feel free to use that platform also for communication around these kind of topics and for calls, etc. Okay, actually, Nicola, do you want to say some final words here also for the closing? We're perfectly on time. I think there is not really much space for discussion, but I hope you also had a little audience there in Berlin, and you did a lot so much in organizing these evaluation sessions. So maybe a few last words from you.
As I wrote before, it would be so great if you were here. You don't see this fantastic room. It's has a this called black light in. We have fantastic food, and the tables are empty. We are missing you so much, and we hope so much to see you, seeing you again next time without Corona. For the session, I'm very delighted that we had so many online viewers. I've counted more than 100 viewers per time, so this is fantastic, and I think this is a very good starting point to get deeper into this evaluation topic, which is very, very important, and I think we need more time and space to discuss this in detail, because it's such a complex topic. But I think we again made a start to do this, and I'm so happy to have you all with us and I hope you enjoyed it too, and I hope that you will find a way to share more information on that in the chat or outside the chat by networking. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. We saw a lot of networking going on. Thank you.
They are somewhat clapping, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye.